for the month of March are on your screens now. 2.05% is the number that has come in compared to 2.38% on a month-on-month basis. So the numbers are lower compared to the previous month. So another number that is trending on the downside when it comes to the wholesale price inflation. Will be counting down to the CPI inflation number later this evening as well. So at least one positive factor coming in on the inflation front.
I think fuel prices were lower. Fuel prices had already started moderating, so that could be a positive. And even according to a few economists, vegetable prices could trend lower in March versus February. So that could explain why the WPI inflation number for the month of March is moderated to 2.05 versus 2.38% on a month-on-month basis. As he said, we are awaiting the CPI print. But from what the RBI had to say, I think the CPI inflation forecast for this year, at least for the first 3 quarters of the coming fiscal year, would be sub 4%, or at least. So anyway, I think inflation was expected to be fairly benign. But we have Madan Sabnavis, Chief Economist, Bank of Baroda, now joining us on the show. The overall WPI inflation is moderated month on month. Your initial thoughts? What could be driving this?
No, I think it could be a combination of factors. I think one is that food prices have definitely come down. There's also been the base effect, which will be having a similar kind of moderating effect going ahead also. And I think more importantly, we have seen the crude oil price. I think that is something which holds a clue, because that's something which has been going in the negative region. And given the fact that based on the global dynamics which we're witnessing, there will be a tendency for crude oil price to remain well below $70 per barrel. I think this is something which gets reflected more in the WPI rather than the CPI. That's the second factor. And the third would be, of course, in terms of manufactured goods. I think even manufactured goods inflation would tend to be low, which I expect even for the month of March and going ahead. It will be on similar lines. The main reason is that we still need to see the demand side factors play out for these prices to move up, which presently we are not really expecting. So I think all the 3 segments would be contributing to a low WPI inflation number, not just for March, but also for the months going ahead.
Okay, manufactured products inflation at 3.07 is a marginal increase month on month, but the food inflation though 4.66 compared to 5.94% in the previous month. And Madan, good afternoon. Thank you for joining in. See, we are counting down to the CPI number as well, and the RBI in their policy statement too has trimmed down its CPI inflation forecasts for the full year as well. Now, with this kind of number on the WPI front, what are you expecting from the CPI later this evening?
See, we have a forecast of 3.6% for CPI inflation for the month of March. But I think going ahead, we will actually be expecting this number to moderate further. This is primarily an account of the base effect, because I think that we had very high numbers last year. So that's going to translate into lower numbers, because we haven't really seen food prices actually cooling down that much in the market. So if you're actually going to the shop to pick up your vegetables, fruits, or your pulses, the prices have remained more or less unchanged, maybe marginally gone down. But I think it's the base effect which has contributed to this moderation, which will continue for the next 3 to 6 months. So I think the important part will be as to how the monsoon pans out. And information which we got from SkyMet is they're expecting a normal monsoon. I'm quite sure IMD will have their forecast very soon, which should also be on similar lines. So I think there'll be less worries in terms of food prices. So to that extent, I think CPI inflation, which has a large proportion of the weight in for food items, would be under control. The only concern could, of course, be vegetable oils, which is an imported product. That was something which could be pushing the inflation numbers up. But on the whole, I think it will mean moderation.
In fact, today IMD will be releasing their long-range forecast for the current monsoon at 3 p.m. So all eyes will be on that. IMD's forecast will come at 3 p.m. today in the afternoon. But Madan, what's your expectation of how WPI and CPI will trend, say, in the month of April, based on the first half, the first fortnight that we've seen?
It looks like that WPI will moderate further. Again, the main reason is base effect, as well as the fact that crude oil prices have actually been lower in the month of April compared to March. So I think that's why we could be expecting WPI to move downwards. In terms of CPI, I think a similar kind of trend can be seen, though I think the only worrisome factor will be the gold component, because we have seen in the so-called core inflation component, gold has been one thing which has a significant weight in the CPI, and that's something which has been doing very well in the market, which means that core inflation pressure could be there. But on the whole, well, it will be lower than 4% for sure.
All right, Madan, thank you so much for sparing time and joining us today this afternoon on this coverage for the WPI number 2.05% for the month of March. Expect that to further trend down is what Madan Sabnavis of Bank of Baroda just said. Core inflation too at 1.5% compared to 1.3%, but the food articles inflation is significantly lower on a month-on-month basis. So we take a short break here on this on halftime report. On this note, the Nifty still almost 500 points higher, continuing to remain above that 23,300 mark. More on the markets with Sandeep Bansal of ASK Investment Managers on the other side to decode whether the market rally will sustain. Stay tuned.